Welcome, everybody, to a very special NFL free agency special here. I'm Steve Buchanan with my man, Ross Tucker. One of us used to play in the NFL. I'll let you guess which one of those is that between the two of us here. But Ross Tucker making some major noise in the broadcasting industry as well. Happy to have him on here. The host of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. You can also follow him on Twitter at Ross Tucker NFL. Spoiler alert, that's the NFL player right there. It says it right in his handle. Ross, really excited to be doing this with you, man. We're going to go over all the free agency news that has come down the wire thus far.
Yeah, Steve, let's do it, man. It was so fun back around the Super Bowl, right before the Super Bowl, when you and I were kind of going back and forth. I remember, like, in 11th grade, you had a triple in high school baseball or something like that. So that was fun. But yeah, man, I mean, it's kind of crazy that now is the start of the new NFL league year because there's been a lot of moves over the last 48 hours. I mean, they've all been announced. They just can't be official until now. But there are some teams, several teams, that have made some major noise, including the Patriots, the Jaguars, and even the Arizona Cardinals, Steve. I don't know where you're going to start, but I just tweeted at Ross Tucker NFL. You think about the Cardinals. First, they got J.J. Watt. Then they get A.J. Green. Now they trade for Rodney Hudson. They're acquiring a lot of 30-year-olds, Steve, a lot of guys in their 30s. You know what that tells me? Their GM and head coach know they have to win this year. It's year 3 for Kingsbury. It's year whatever for Steve Keim. I think they recognize they've got Kyler Murray still on his rookie contract. In year 3 of that rookie contract, I think they know the time is now. They have to find a way to get to the postseason in 2021.
No, and absolutely. And we think about some of the teams that have made the big moves, and we'll talk about the Patriots in just a second, but talking with the Cardinals here, they haven't made like as many moves as the Patriots, but the moves that they've made have been strategic, and they're, going after areas that they need help in, like wide receiver. They needed somebody else other than DeAndre Hopkins. If you were able to cover DeAndre Hopkins, which is no easy task ever, you can kind of shut down that offense. So getting somebody to be on the other side of DeAndre Hopkins, huge. Adding somebody like J.J. Watt. I mean, can you get a better guy on the line there than J.J. Watt? So they're making the right moves. It felt like they were a couple pieces away from really making some noise. And it sounds like, Ross, from what you're saying, you think they're doing that right now.
Well, and there's a bunch of different things to get to, right? So number one, they still haven't re-signed Kenyon Drake.
Right.
And I'm not sure they're going to, Steve. So whether this is for DraftKings Sportsbook or for DFS, I don't know that they're willing to pay up for Kenyon Drake. Cliff Kingsbury, their head coach, has really talked up Chase Edmonds, who lives about 3 minutes away from me here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, as a guy that is capable of carrying the load. I just think they decided that Kenyon Drake, that's not a place where they want to spend a lot of money. I don't think they want to spend a lot of money at the running back position. They know they get Chandler Jones back. Now they bring in J.J. Watt to sometimes be on the same side, sometimes be opposite of him. You have A.J. Green. I got to tell you, A.J. Green being back doesn't make me feel as if Larry Fitzgerald's going to play another year, although I guess that's still to be determined. But yes, I think A.J. Green wants, for the first time in his life, to be a number 2, to not have double coverage, to not have the safety over the top. Truth be told, he looked bad at times last year. I mean, he looked really bad. He looked like he had not recovered from that injury. He looked like he aged 10 years in that year he took off a couple years ago. Hard to believe the Bengals had him on the franchise tag last year. That's about as little of a return on investment as anybody's ever gotten from a franchise tag. Let's be a terrible team, and the player hardly does anything for us. But he's a year further removed, and I think he realizes if he ever wants one more big bite at the financial apple, that this is a good place for him to do it. But they need to win, Steve. I mean, think about this, okay? They had that Hail Mary against the Bills, and they still weren't good enough to beat out Mitchell Trubisky and the Chicago Bears for the 7th seed in the NFC. That's not a good look, Steve. And by the way, I saw your graphic on Twitter, Tuck and Buck. Do people call you Buck? Like, is that a thing, or are you Steve?
You know what, Russ? I mean, you're a big guy, so I'm not going to tell you to call me anything because, you still look like you're very much in shape. I'm kind of on teetering on, in shape or not. You can call me Steve. You can call me Buch, whatever tickles your fancy. That's what you can do.
It's Buch. It's not
Right.
Buck. It's not Tuck and Buck.
No, we can go with Buch. Tuck and Buck's actually a pretty nice name, but Buch is probably the preferable one that you can call me.
Shout out, by the way, to Robbie Noble. I'm checking out Robbie Noble in the chat section. See, this is not amateur hour here, okay, Steve? I'm not one of those pretty faces that just shows up and doesn't acknowledge the great people we've got in the chat right now watching us. So shout out Robbie Noble.
Yeah, Robbie's my guy. Robbie's been like my number one fan when we're doing these Madden simulations, whatever. So shout out to him. But let's continue on with the free agent talk. And by the way, if you have any questions you want to drop, by all means, do so in the chat. And we will get to those as the show moves along. Anything good, we'll throw them out there. But let's just talk about the Patriots for a minute. It's no, secret that the post-Tom Brady era didn't exactly go to plan. Or maybe it did. Because the amount of free agent signings that they had, it kind of feels like this was the plan. It feels like the 2021 was kind of the bridge to this huge, massive amount of cap space that they have, and they are using it immensely and quickly. You look at some of the names that they've brought on. They added weapons on the sides there. Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, John O. Smith, Hunter Henry in the middle of the field at the tight ends, the dual tight end threat. What do you kind of make of some of these moves here? Do these moves indicate that the Patriots are going to actually roll with Cam Newton? Because if you look at where he was most successful throwing the ball last year, it was short throws in the middle of the field. 69 for 89 in that sense, 620 yards, and 85.4% adjusted completion percentage. So you give him the two best tight end options that were on the market with Smith and Henry, and those guys should thrive there. So do you think these moves are setting up for another year of Cam Newton, or with the capital that they have that they can potentially trade up in the draft, is that where they're still going to be looking?
All right. So there's several different things to get to here, right? I do believe that the Patriots were always poised to spend money, Steve, in 2021. Okay. I do believe that. However, two different factors come into play for them to spend as much as they did. Number one, I think that Bill Belichick looked at this as a unique buying opportunity.
Right.
Because with the cap coming down close to $30 million from where some people thought it would be. Last year, 198. People this year thought it'd be between 208, maybe 212. It's 182, bro. It's $30 million less than where some people thought it would be. So because of that, I think Belichick looked at it like, I got all this money to spend.
Right.
A lot of other people don't have it.
Right.
The contracts aren't going to get crazy because there's not a lot of bidders out there. There's not a lot of suitors. I'm going to be able to get a bunch of good players, a bunch of upgrades for good value. So while I think 2021 was always a year where they might be more aggressive, I think the confluence of events of COVID and the cap coming down, plus, I don't know, Steve, have you ever heard of this guy? Former teammate of mine. I got the helmet back there somewhere behind me. Maybe I'll put it on. In 05 and 06, Thomas Edward Patrick Brady. Never asked him what the deal is with two middle names. I don't know why people have two middle names. Do you have two middle names?
I absolutely do not. Robert is good enough for me.
Dude, how about this middle name? When I got traded from the Patriots to the Browns, everybody always called me Tuck, okay? Yep. The Browns starting right tackle was Ryan Tucker. They already had a Tuck.
Right.
And they didn't want to call me Ross. So they asked me what my middle name was. My middle name is Finch. You can laugh if you want. It's not like
are the doors locked? Are the doors locked? They are? Okay.
Okay. Hold on a second. It's not like Finch, like a first name, like the big dude from Wildcats, or
Right.
the guy in American Pie that hooks up with
Oh.
Stifler's mom. Okay.
Right.
It's not Finch like that. All right. It's Finch because it's my grandmother's maiden name.
Oh,
So
okay.
in my family, for whatever reason, middle names, you always pick one of the grandmother's maiden names, like to keep that name going. Anyway, long story short, they call me Finch in Cleveland. And this is not a Brown shirt. It's a Princeton shirt. I wouldn't wear Browns anything. That was not a tremendous experience for me. I don't even know how we got on this tangent. Oh, Brady. Okay.
Right.
So let's not kid ourselves. Okay. This is what I do, by the way. It just makes it more fun. Let's not kid ourselves. Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl in his first year without Bill Belichick as his coach, including winning 3 straight road playoff games, including winning 3 games in a row against first ballot Hall of Fame quarterbacks, likely Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. There is no doubt in my mind it would go against the laws of human nature, Steve, if part of what Bill Belichick was doing was not in response to what Brady did. Look, he knows his legacy's on the line. He knows everybody's keeping score moving forward for what he does without Brady and what Brady does without him. And not only that, look, there's an aura to the Patriots still, right?
Of course.
If they have another crappy year in a row, it's gone, bro. This is the NFL. You have 2 bad years in a row, bye-bye, it's gone. Everybody will know that it wasn't the Patriot way, it was the Brady way. So he goes out. It's a lot of guys. It's a lot of money. You know, Nelson Aguilar is getting $11 million a year for sure. It can be up to $13 million a year. I have heard from multiple sources that guys like Will Fuller, Kenny Galladay, Juju Smith-Schuster, they haven't signed yet because they can't even get anybody to give them $10 million a year.
That's crazy.
So when you look at it like that, right, Steve, that's not a great look for the Patriots giving Nelson Aguilar all that money.
Right.
And if these other guys, who I think are better players than Aguilar, aren't able to get that money, they made Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry the 3rd and 4th highest paid tight ends in NFL history behind George Kittle and Travis Kelce.
Right.
Now, I think Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith are both good players, but they're not close to George Kittle or Travis Kelce.
No.
They're not close. And ultimately, I think they're a better team, Steve. I think that they're a 9-10 win team now, maybe. But Cam Newton's still their quarterback.
Right.
He didn't look real good last year. I don't think they'll get another veteran. I think that their hope is that one of the 5 projected first rounders, maybe Trey Lance or Mac Jones, falls to them at 15.
Yeah, you know, Mac Jones has been the name I think that we keep hearing associated with the Patriots because there's a very legitimate chance that he could be there at 15. But the other thing that makes me think too, I mean, they just gave Cam Newton $14 million, a massive jump from what he had last year. I think he was just at $1 million. So it wasn't like it was just a minimal bump. It was a substantial raise from what we saw. Now, the first couple weeks of the season, Cam Newton, no doubt he looked like he was on the right track. He looked like he was on pace to kind of shadow what he should be making. But after COVID, you can say what you want. Nobody can really speak to that except for Cam Newton himself. But he said he felt like he was weeks behind this offense. And that's been one of the biggest gripes of joining the Patriots. If you can't keep up, you are going to quickly fall behind. And when you're the quarterback, the focal point of this offense, if you can't keep up, nobody else is going to keep up with you. So if the plan is to keep Newton, at least Belichick is surrounding him with some weapons that can do some damage. Like we talk about Aguilar, right? At least of wide receivers from last season who had at least 80 targets, he led the league in yards per reception at 18.7. He can get downfield. He can get damage done. Like I said, they signed the top 2 tight ends available in the middle of the field. That's where Cam Newton was getting the most work done. So at least from this standpoint, there are weapons out there that can help Cam Newton succeed. He did not have that last year. Did not at all. Not to their fault. Guys like N'Keal Harry, you can only do so much, but at least they're getting set up that if it is Cam Newton, if it doesn't end up being someone like Mac Jones, at least he'll be surrounded with the weapons that he can do something with.
Well, look, all of these quarterback moves that people don't like, right? Andy Dalton in Chicago, Cam Newton in New England, wherever you want to go. I always say NBA. People are like, what does that mean? NBA. Next best alternative. What is your next? Of course, everybody wants Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson. Of course.
Right.
But what is your realistic next best alternative?
Right.
I think the Patriots decided to get Cam Newton. Look, he'll get at least $5 million, $2 million signing bonus, $1.5 million guaranteed base salary. But then it's roster bonuses, workout bonus, $8.5 million in incentives. So I think the Patriots looked at it and said, listen, if we can get Cam back for $5 million, he knows the offense now. He'll be with us an entire offseason. We know what he can do. We know what he can't do. I think they thought that was better than Trubisky or going after Jameis or going after Andy Dalton. I kind of thought they might go after Dalton. No, they decided rather have Cam Newton. I get it. But I think all these teams are looking at what their options really are, especially if you're a team that doesn't draft in the top 8, because there's a bunch of teams in the top 8, top 10 that we think are going to get quarterbacks. Certainly, we know the Jets and the Jaguars. Those two they're getting quarterbacks. Miami Dolphins, very possibly. We know the Eagles might be in the quarterback market. Carolina Panthers are getting a quarterback one way or the other. Yep. So, I mean, that might be 4 or 5 of the guys right there just in the top 8, or if other teams try to trade up to get those guys. So I think you have to sometimes be realistic about where you are and what you can reasonably try to accomplish.
So I think that's a good segue. So let's talk about Andy Dalton. Now, if you already follow Russ Tucker NFL, you might know why I'm going to this. Ross was very upset this morning. Ross was not digging the shade being thrown at Andy Dalton's way, who signed a 1-year deal with the Bears for $10 million. Now, the first plan, it seemed like, was that they were going to try to acquire Russell Wilson. Did you hear the package that they offered reportedly for Russell Wilson?
Yeah. 3 1s and a 3.
3 1s, a 3, and 2 unnamed starters. We don't know who those mystery men were, but 2 starters. So all of that for Russell Wilson, and the Seahawks did not bite on that one. So they go to the next best option in their mind, which was Andy Dalton. Now, is it the best landing spot for Andy Dalton? Not really, at least in my mind. I mean, he goes from one poor offensive line to Dallas to another one in Chicago. You look at the numbers when Dalton was the starter. He was under pressure on 29% of his dropbacks last year. So obviously there was some pressure there. But when he was working with a clean pocket, 76.1 adjusted completion percentage, just under 7 yards per pass attempt. But here's what I do like about this, Ross, is that if you look at the schedule for the Bears next season, and this is just going off the numbers from last year, they don't face a lot of teams that excelled in the pass rush. You're going to get some of the, the notable ones with the Steelers, the 49ers, and the Buccaneers. But after that, at least from how things have shaken out so far in free agency, there's not a lot of teams that's going to put a lot of pressure on Andy Dalton. So at least that gives me some thought that maybe Dalton can actually succeed here with somebody like Allen Robinson, because he was loaded with weapons with Dallas. There's no doubt that the Cowboys are loaded on offense, but obviously things just went to shambles quickly for them.
Here, yeah, Steve, there's a couple things here that I think need to be noted, right? Number one is that the reason why the Seahawks didn't do the trade is because there was not a path to a quarterback.
Sure.
3 first-round picks for the Bears. What does that really do for them? I mean,
right.
This year's pick is in the 20s. And then when they get Russell Wilson, they're not going to be top 10 picks. They're going to be in the 20s.
Right.
And the Bears don't have a quarterback to trade. So there's not really a path, if you're the Seahawks, to get a quarterback. They need a path to getting a quarterback. I'm actually surprised more people haven't gone ahead and said, what about the Raiders trading Derek Carr and picks and players to the Seahawks? Because I think John Schneider and Pete Carroll in their head could think, you know what? We could win with Derek Carr. You can't just take picks from the Bears and have no quarterback. But Derek Carr was a top 15 quarterback in the NFL last year. So if the Raiders were willing to go in big with draft picks and players and Derek Carr so that the Seahawks can get a quarterback, I think that's something Seattle might look a little bit harder at. My point about Dalton, and I thank the DraftKings team for putting my tweet up there at Ross Tucker NFL. I'm so sick, Steve, of the everybody sucks culture. I'm so tired of it. Like, we've gotten to the point now where in the NFL as a quarterback, if you're not Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, or Tom Brady, you suck, dude. You suck. He sucks. He sucks. Like, Kirk Cousins is one of the top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL. Yet, I bet we could get half of Twitter right now to say, he sucks, dude. He sucks, bro. He sucks. Like, it's just so unrealistic. We've gotten to the point where you either win the whole thing or you're terrible. You're either the best or you suck. Like, why not just say, huge disappointment that the Bears got Andy Dalton as their starter. He's a low-end starter, high-end backup. They're not going anywhere with him significant. They're not a contender. And I'm fine with all of that. I'm fine with the disappointment. I'm fine with the anger if you're a Bears fan. I'm fine with saying they're not going anywhere. I'm fine with saying Andy Dalton is below average. I just think, like, when people say it just bothers me. I'm tired of it. It's not healthy for anything in life to just be like, if you're not Mahomes or Rodgers, you suck.
I mean, I was doing a Madden simulation here on the Dream Stream last night. People said I suck. I'm just doing play-by-play for a Madden simulation, and people say I suck. So the I suck culture kind of follows everybody everywhere. But I want to touch upon something that you brought up about Derek Carr. If the Las Vegas Raiders did trade Derek Carr, would that indicate a rebuild? Because if you look at the rest of the team, aside from Derek Carr, what do they really have to build off of there? Like, if they trade Derek Carr, and they're not exactly, strapped with cap space either, that would mean that they have to be in a rebuild mode, correct?
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't really know what's going on, to be honest with you, with the Raiders right now. Like, this Rodney Hudson trade,
yeah,
I don't get it. I mean, I don't understand it. They're taking a big dead cap hit. I guess they get a third-round pick back. They trade Trent Brown. They get rid of Gabe Jackson. I'm not sure I understand what the Raiders are doing. Now, they did bring Incognito back. The defense is where they need to add people, but they really haven't done anything on that side of the ball yet.
Nope.
I don't know. It's crazy, man.
Speaking of things that really don't make sense, so hopefully you can help me piece this together. Let's talk about Aaron Jones going back to the Packers. Now, the move itself is fine. I have no qualms against Aaron Jones going back to the Packers. He was one of the best running backs in the league last year. But when you use your second-round pick to draft a running back in A.J. Dillon, who I thought looked great in the brief time we did see him, carried the ball 55 times last season, 286 yards, shakes out to 5.2 yards per attempt, 3.44 yards after contact per attempt. So he's going to be your RB2. Jamal Williams no longer in the mix. He is now with the Lions, so he doesn't have to worry about that. So Dillon does move into that backup role. But it feels like the Packers had a plan last year in the offseason, have crumpled it up and gone a different direction, because when they said they weren't going to franchise tag Aaron Jones, okay, makes sense. We expected A.J. Dillon to have a prominent role in this offense. Here it is. A couple days later, Jones is back in the mix. 4 years, $48 million. Do you like the move for the Packers? And do you think that they just kind of went with last year, crumpled it up, and now are starting fresh?
So a couple things. Number one, after Aaron Rodgers gave that speech after they lost to the Bucks, they couldn't go back and not bring Aaron Jones back. I mean, they already are lacking weapons a little bit at receiver. I think they realized how bad of a look that would be. Right. I think the trade-off in their mind, if you look at the Jones contract, it's 2 years, $20 million. $20 million in the first 2 years, okay? Yep. Which is a little bit more than the franchise tag. Then the team has the option for those next 2 years. Pretty decent chance he never gets those. Pretty decent chance he doesn't get those third and fourth years. But now they have him for 2 years while A.J. Dillon is on his rookie contract for 2 more years. And they still are going to use A.J. Dillon a lot more. You know, he slides right into the number 2 role. He was more or less number 3 last year. But with Jamal Williams in Detroit, which, by the way, is not a great fantasy fit for him with DeAndre Swift there, you know, A.J. Dillon is going to get a lot more run. It's interesting. I was talking on the Fantasy Feast podcast about this today, about Aaron Jones. And the thing is, A.J. Dillon can't really do anything out of the backfield. But Jamal Williams could. Jamal Williams took some of those reps from Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon won't. So Aaron Jones is going to end up getting more catches. You know, he might not get any more carries, Steve, but he's going to get more targets. And I didn't even know this until my Fantasy Feast co-host, Joe Dolan, said this. Evidently, they've done the numbers, and every target for a running back is 2.5 times more valuable than a carry in a PPR league. So I don't know how they did the math there, but every target, obviously, most running back targets are relatively safe, so they catch most of them, right? Like it's a lot of check downs. They catch most of them. So you get the point for PPR. Then they're able to usually get more yards after that than they would on a carry. So Aaron Jones might not get any more carries now, but getting more receptions. I mean, he's a first-round pick all day in fantasy again this year.
Yeah, Aaron Jones last year, 77% catch rate, 7.6 yard per receptions on that. So obviously doing the work where he needs to, but just another weapon for Aaron Rodgers to have, because obviously that's been the biggest gripe with the Packers. Nobody else after Devontae Parker, although he didn't seem to have a nice rapport with Allen Lazard, especially near the second half of the season. So there definitely is that there. But, you know, I like your point there about, you know, maybe he doesn't even get those last 2 years, because it did seem to be a bit weird for me because they used that big high draft pick for Dillon to begin with. I know we're running up. We got about 10 minutes left. I want to get your take on some of the wide receivers that are left, because if you look at the name, it's like this treasure trove of guys who are still free agents in the wide receiver role. But I think it's also fair to say that all of these guys that are free agents right now couldn't have come off a worse year for them to be free agents. Kenny Golladay, you know, obviously with the issues with injuries. Juju Smith-Schuster had a really quiet year. Chase Claypool kind of really took that wide receiver 1 role. Deontay Johnson making a lot of noise there too. T.Y. Hilton. What do you make of this wide receiver field that's left really? And who's going to be the first domino to fall for the rest of them to start to get some interest?
So this is interesting, and hopefully everybody listening or everybody in the chat can listen to this and hear this. Collusion is illegal among the teams, but players and agents can talk amongst themselves. Players and agents can collude. And my sneaky suspicion, Steve, is that the agents for Juju and Kenny Golladay and Will Fuller and maybe even Curtis Samuel and T.Y. Hilton, they're saying, look, we can't accept this. We can't do this. Like we can't take this kind of little money, especially, by the way, after Corey Davis got 3 years, $37.5 million from the Jets, including $27 million guaranteed, which is really interesting, by the way, because Corey Davis is a big-time one-year wonder, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, just this last year. And by the way, when everybody was playing coverage on A.J. Brown, who's a total monster, So I think it's interesting that that's who the Jets targeted, as opposed to Juju, who's 24. Will Fuller, I know he's got the injury issues at 27. Curtis Samuel, 24. Kenny Golladay. They went with Corey Davis. It sounds like no other teams are offering Corey Davis money to these other guys. And I think they're talking amongst themselves and saying, we can't accept this. We can't do this. The problem is it is a good receiver draft again.
Right.
And there have been so many guys, and you could name them all, but they just think about like late first round guys like Justin Jefferson, second and third round picks like Deebo Samuel and DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin. There's a dozen of them, right?
Yeah.
So I think the teams are like, wait a minute. Receiver position has been loaded the last couple of years among college kids, and they've shown they can come in and play well right away. I just think these teams are hesitant to spend a lot of money when they can get one of these guys in the draft who's younger and a lot cheaper.
But would it be fair to say that Corey Davis amongst that group is probably the safest of those guys? Because look at the injuries that we've dealt with Will Fuller and the Kenny Golladay. Juju Smith-Schuster didn't necessarily have the injuries, but his production took a huge dive last year. So it's kind of ugly to say that Corey Davis is the safest guy because he's kind of been, like you said, that 1 year wonder. But is that why that was the guy who went first?
So it's a great question. And this is what happens sometimes with these teams. It's almost like, Steve, you're better off not playing very much or even very well your first couple years.
Sure.
And then your last year, right before you're a free agent, you have a great year because then the teams all think, oh my gosh, he's getting better. Yep. He's getting better. He'll even be better for us next year. There's untapped potential. Whereas if you kind of had a disappointing year like a Golladay or a not as good year like Juju Smith-Schuster, they're not as excited. They're not as enticed. I think it's poor. I think it's poor by the team. I disagree. I disagree with your logic, but that's sort of how they look at it sometimes. For years, the Ravens would have these guys that didn't play much their first couple years. And then the last year they went off and then they got paid. Paul Kruger, Pernell McPhee, every year there was another Ravens D lineman who hadn't played much before that. And all of a sudden he goes bonkers in his free agent year and leaves.
I want to get to a couple of the questions in the chat that we have here. Rich One Beats. Let's go, baby. Ross, who is the biggest acquisition so far through the moves that have been made in your opinion?
Ooh, how about this? If we're talking about making a difference in who wins a division, I'm going to go with my boy, Ryan Fitzmagic.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, look, I could say Leonard Williams or Trent Williams. They got big money. But people don't realize Fitz has played really well the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, he won 5 games on a Miami Dolphins team. I didn't think we'd win a game all year in 2019. Right. Last year, I think he had the 4th best QBR or something crazy, whatever they do, however they do that. And the only reason why he didn't play is because they wanted to see what they had in Tua. Point is Fitzpatrick's a huge upgrade for the Washington football team at quarterback. And they won it last year. Now, instead of Dwayne Haskins and Alex Smith, who didn't do much, they got Fitzmagic. I think right now the Washington football team and the Cowboys are the favorites in that division. Washington football team also got William Jackson, the corner from Cincinnati, who's a really good player. I mean, can you imagine the Washington football team might win back-to-back division titles with Alex Smith and Ryan Fitzpatrick? What a time to be alive.
Man, I was saying it last year. Defensively, they have that locked. They just need one more piece in the offense. Fitzpatrick could be that guy. As wild as it is to say, the man loves his cake. He loves to win. He's going to make something happen over in Washington. We got about 2.5 minutes left, so I want to leave with this here. Give me one destination for a free agent that you think could be a big surprise out of all the guys that are left. What could be a surprise move that you think could happen? And then I'll give mine and we'll wrap up.
I'm going to say surprise. He's not a free agent, but I'm going to say surprise landing spot for Deshaun Watson.
I'm ready for this one, baby.
Whether that's New England Patriots, Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh no.
Somebody else. There have been other teams that are rumored to be lurking. I saw Jason Lockenfora had a report. You've seen the reports about the Patriots. It might not. Now, I still think, by the way, he goes to the Jets or the Dolphins.
Sure.
Because I think the Texans need to have something to sell to their fan base. They need to have a young quarterback to build around. They need the second or third overall pick to do so.
Yep.
So I still think he goes to one of those teams. But I don't know, man. I'll say that would be my surprise, is that he goes to a team like that.
We're going to wrap it up here. I won't go too deep into it, but I think Will Fuller to the Titans is a legitimate landing spot. I think it would suit him well. He would take over that Corey Davis role, but they need somebody else on the other side of A.J. Brown, because you said it, he's a monster, but they need somebody else on the field as a threat, a deep threat. I think Will Fuller would be a perfect spot for the Titans. We shall see. Free agency is going to continue. Today, it officially started. We want to thank everybody for joining us here on the show. Ross, it was really great to mess with you again, man. Hope we can do it again soon. And I really enjoyed talking some football with you. You know, somebody who's been in the league. It's a nice breath of fresh air.